the government of my country has already historically, for example, given men of color vasectomies against their consent, like as part of criminal punishment proceedings and stuff like that, and like forcibly sterilizing women as well, specifically women of color. But like, yeah, like when attacks on bodily autonomy happen, they can affect a larger number of people than you think. Like, if you're like, oh, I'm a white man, I'm safe from that. Like, are you fucking Jewish? Because if you're Jewish, they might not consider you white enough to allow you to have the long-term decisions to have children. You know, you can be considered undesirable for other reasons.
Yeah, and also like every person that I should have brought this up earlier, but like if disabled people, you're at a big risk too, especially with no health care and stuff. And like anyone can become disabled at any point. Like,
especially
even
now.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like, we don't know the effects of long COVID or any of this stuff that's happening, or like the increased risk of gun violence right now. And like, you know, it's there's always a risk. Like, even if you are now, like, if you became disabled, would you be safe in this country? Would you be able to afford like the healthcare you need? Probably not. I mean, part of this gets down to like the concept of like social murder, which I'm going to make a video on at some point. Or just this idea, like I think it was like an Engels thing, that that the upper classes do to the poor, where they intentionally just don't give the poor what they need to survive and just kill them off that way. And I feel like a lot of that is that a lot of the policies in the US, especially in the South, and a lot of the ones that are controlled by Republicans, and especially in regards to disabled people, it is happening. Like a lot of like the thing with the price of insulin and stuff. Like if you've got type 1 diabetes, like it's incredibly difficult to get the insulin you need in America. And like a lot of conditions like that, and like it's just designed to kill the poor when they have certain conditions. And like that's not an exaggeration, that's just fucking true. And like there's a lot of this knock-on effects of like austerity and like the decades of austerity since the Thatcher and Reagan era, and they haven't gone away. And I think that's a lot of the reason why everything's kicking off everywhere right now, because we've had that all over the world. But like everywhere, if you've not got money, is becoming very like that. And especially if you're disabled, and then you have a life that gives you extra costs just because of who you are, like trans people, in the way like a lot of the trans people are medicalized, because a lot of us need medical care. If you're medically transitioning, you are dependent on that. If you're like me and you need like medical care for like mental stuff as well as trans stuff, you are reliant on both having a medical system that accepts trans health and mental health as valid, two things that are dismissed a lot by like conservatives, and often attacked and stigmatized because it doesn't fit their worldview. Like, you could be, even if you think you're the most healthy person in the world, if you figure out you're depressed and you find like a medication that saves your life, basically, the government could, like, this state could turn around and say, well, that's not natural, you can fuck off. Like, it's quite wide reaching, and I don't mean to like just exaggerate the scope of this further and further and further, but I do think you have to consider yourself within the context of the society. You're not an island. You're part of the society that is systematically designed to, you know, trim off the bottom however many percent. And, you know, you're much closer, even if you are like fairly affluent, you're much closer to being homeless than you are to being a billionaire. Like, you're not safe from that bottom rung. We should be fighting for each of us.
Yeah. And I do want to say, like, it is not catastrophizing at all to suggest that more and more people are going to be catching bad waves from this, basically. Like, you know, you say disabled people and, like, the potential for anyone to become disabled and all that. Like, the actual reality of the progression of fascism is that the circle of acceptable people gets smaller and smaller, you know? Like, Hitler will tolerate a gay man working as his close companion, you know, up until a certain point, and then that guy gets the wall, you know, like, exactly, yeah. So it's absolutely tracks with history that the groups get smaller and smaller, and there absolutely is stigmatization of just mental illness on its own, even if you're not otherwise disabled. If you take antidepressants, well, you know what they say every single goddamn time there's a mass shooting in my country? They say, oh, this poor loner needed a therapist. But at the same time, we have had a couple mass shootings recently where they will cite that this person was on antidepressants and that might have been a contributing factor. So like having mental health issues at all is going to be something that is considered an undesirable trait. And trans people are being conflated as having a mental disorder and as being pedophiles. Like basically the group of pedophiles, trans and gay people, and mentally ill people are just like slowly being conglomerized.
Yeah, the Venn diagram slowly becomes a circle.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh dear. This was supposed to be talking about plastic surgery, I guess.